Hey guys, Ben Starr here, and it is my roommate's birthday today. He has requested a barbecue. So today I am going to show you how to make traditional Texas-style barbecue ribs, both pork ribs and beef ribs. So let's get started. So to prepare your ribs for the smoker, I like to stick with Texas tradition and do a dry rub instead of a marinade. I think it's best for ribs, really. And I've actually got pork and beef ribs here, both spare ribs. And I just take horseradish mustard and I smear it all over the rib, and then I dust my dry rub on top of it. And my dry rub, I just make at home. It's got garlic powder, onion powder, chili powder, smoked paprika, salt, black pepper, and cumin in it, another traditional Texas rub. So you get that rubbed on there and you let it sit at least 4 hours, preferably overnight in the fridge. But about an hour before you're ready to smoke them, bring them out and let them sit on the countertop to come up to room temperature so it doesn't bring down the temperature of your smoker as soon as you add them. And wherever you decide to let them rest out in the open, make sure they are not within reach of your pets, because dogs find this to be like the most delicious honey in the world. And my dog, Oliver, has been sitting right underneath these ribs, eyeing them constantly for the last hour. He will not budge from this spot. He wants these ribs so bad. This is my combination smoker and grill, and if you look here, this is called an offset smoker. It's got this little firebox down here, and this is where we put our charcoal and our wood that sends the smoke up into the main grilling chamber here. And the offset smoker allows you to maintain really low temperatures, which is critical for Texas-style barbecuing. So about 30 minutes before you're ready to start barbecuing, you need to build your fire. And don't ever buy the charcoal that has like the lighter fluid inside it. Don't ever use lighter fluid. It's a bunch of chemicals. You don't want it in your food anyway, and your food's going to end up tasting like chemicals. So get yourself a chimney starter. They're like 10 bucks at Walmart. Fill it with natural charcoal. Put a wad of newspaper in the bottom, and then light it. It's going to get your charcoal red hot, perfect temperature to go into the offset smoker in about 15 or 20 minutes. Then we'll let the whole thing come up to temperature, and we'll add our meat. Now, when your chimney has flames coming out the top of it, and your charcoal is covered with a nice fine white powder, it is time to go ahead and add it to your firebox. So you've got a nice fire going there. We're going to add a couple of pieces of wood. I'm using grape wood today. And that'll get nice and ignited. And then we're going to close the firebox and make sure that your air control on the side is fully open at first, so we can get a lot of air to that fire and then get the grill brought up to temperature. And it's a good idea to have a separate thermometer in your grill. Don't trust your grill's thermometer, because it's usually located on the lid, which is at the top of the grill, and the hot air rises, so the temperature up there is going to be hotter than it's going to be at meat level. So get yourself one of these little grill thermometers and set it here so that it's going to measure the temperature where the meat actually is. Okay, so now it's time to put our ribs on the smoker. For the beef ribs, I smoke them bone side down. And for my pork ribs, I smoke them bone side up. I've just discovered they end up more tender and juicy that way. Close the lid. Now, ideally you want to keep your smoker at 225 to 250 degrees. That's going to smoke a chicken in about 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours. It's going to smoke a big rack of ribs in about 5 hours too. But you're shooting for an internal temperature on the ribs of between 170 to 180 degrees. And I know that sounds really hot, but what happens is ribs have a lot of collagen, which is like connective tissue inside the meat. And that collagen doesn't melt until you hit 170 to 180 degrees. And once that melts, it goes down through the meat, which is actually totally dried out by this point, and it re-moisturizes it. So if you don't take it to at least towards the 180 degree mark, your ribs are going to come out dry and tough. So now it's a waiting game. Another Texas barbecue technique is called mopping, and it's basically just applying a marinade, or what we call a mop, to the meat while it's cooking. Now you want to do this about every 30 minutes. Don't open this all the time to check on it because you're letting all your heat out. But my mop is made of about 1/3 vegetable oil and 2/3 apple cider vinegar. And I've also got some salt and garlic powder and onion powder in it as well. So you're just going to gently mop this marinade onto the top of the meat as it's cooking. It will help keep it moist, and it also gives it a really good flavor. Okay. Now, you really want to watch your temperature. You're going to try to keep it between 225 degrees and 250 degrees. If you get higher than about 275, you start cooking your meat too fast. It's going to dry out, turn tough and leathery, and it's going to be disgusting. A true Texas barbecue is cooked low and slow. So my temperature right now is about 250. That's pretty much right on the money. Could be a little bit cooler. So you notice I've propped the edge of the pit open just a little bit to let some air circulate. Now, the best way to control your heat is through the vent on the side of the firebox. And if you already have a smoker, you know what I'm talking about, so you don't have to listen to me. But if you've got a new smoker, which you should have, because this is really the only way to make truly delicious barbecue, there's a vent on the side of the firebox. And you open it up, and if you allow more air into the firebox, the fire gets hotter. And if you snuff it down to where you've only got a little bit of air coming in, your fire cools down. You also have a vent on the top of your smoker here that controls how much smoke is held in the chamber. And early on, I like to have a lot of smoke for the first hour, hour and a half. And then towards the end, I'll open it up a little bit so the smoke's going through, and it's primarily just the heat that's cooking the meat. If you over smoke the meat, it can taste kind of acrid and disgusting. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm using grape wood to smoke today. And I use this wood for a number of reasons. First of all, I have easy access to it because I live on this park right here. And native grapes grow in just about all of the 48 states in the continental United States. It is a really fast-growing wood, which means it's sustainable. You can cut a grapevine in another 2 or 3 years, it's going to be this thick again. Another nice thing about it is if you cut it right before you use it, it's full of moisture, way more than ordinary wood. You'll actually sometimes see water dripping out the bottom of the cut after you cut it, so you don't have to soak your wood in water in order to get that great smoke. And actually, it's a very lovely smoke, even though it's a soft wood. It's nice and mild, produces great flavor. Now, you've probably heard in Texas we use mesquite wood to smoke everything, and that is technically true. I don't like mesquite wood to smoke ribs, though, because the rib is so thin that the smoke really permeates all the way through it. And mesquite smoke is incredibly pungent and acrid, and it's delicious on a giant chunk of meat like a brisket. You cannot smoke a brisket with any other wood than mesquite wood. But when it comes to ribs, you really do need a milder wood, unless you're only going to smoke it for 30 or 45 minutes with the mesquite, and then switch to another wood or charcoal for the rest of the smoking process. So, grape wood, cut your own, sustainable, grows back quickly, it's environmentally friendly to use it. Great choice of wood for smoking. So when you're smoking, you have to keep maintaining your fire, otherwise it's going to die and go out. So every 45 minutes to an hour, just add a few more lumps of charcoal. Not too many, otherwise your fire is going to get too hot. A couple more lumps of charcoal and a little bit more wood to smoke. That's going to keep your fire going. Now, when you're about an hour away from the meat being finished, I like to flip it. Now my pork has been roasting bone up. So I'm going to flip it. Gosh, that looks good. So that it's now bone down. And my beef ribs have been roasting bone down. So we're going to turn them bone up. And this gives us a chance to get a nice, good blackened sear on all sides. Okay, the meat's been in here about 4.5 hours, so it's time for us to take its temperature to find out if it's done or how close it is. Now, don't try to barbecue or grill without a meat thermometer. They're $5, people. This is the only way you can truly determine whether your meat is done. On a steak, yeah, maybe you can tell by touching it, but not with a hen, chicken, and certainly not with ribs. So, let's take our meat's temperature. I'm at 172 on my pork ribs, and with pork ribs, I really like, no, I'm at 175, and that's exactly what I like to take pork ribs out at. So, pork ribs are ready to come off the grill. at like 145. Now, if I were to try to eat these ribs right now, they would be tough and dry. I have to take them further to that 180 degree mark so the collagen inside melts down. That's going to deal with our toughness issue. And the melting collagen is going to saturate the fibers of the meat and make it juicy and tender. Right now, these would taste awful. So these have to stay in about another hour. Now, just because these are at temperature does not mean that they are ready to eat. You have got to let them rest to allow the moisture to distribute throughout the meat, and it's going to continue coasting to a little bit of a higher temperature. So set them on the countertop, tent them very lightly with aluminum foil, not too tight, otherwise it's going to steam and you'll lose all that delicious crust, and leave them alone for half an hour.